Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mini Scoop. We have a really fascinating topic to talk about today, and it's in light of what we witnessed this week in the news. We expected to have a vice presidential debate, and we knew this was important. It's the one and only vice presidential debate of the 2024 election cycle between Senator J.D. Vance, a Republican from Ohio, and Governor Tim Walz, a Democrat from Minnesota. So we anticipated this being a big news item. What we didn't anticipate or didn't expect is that we would have real moments of humanity during this debate, where actually you could hear the arguments from both sides and also see that they may agree with each other periodically. It seemed revolutionary in this political environment and refreshing in many ways. That said, there were a lot of really serious topics discussed. And what we are going to discuss today is a serious topic, but it was also a moment where there was some humanity in the debate and there was also something shared. Let me go ahead and play that soundbite for you.
I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough when we know there are things that worked. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference.
Senator.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting. I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's doing okay. So. Christ have mercy. It is awful. And I appreciate what Tim said, actually, about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Okay, first of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it.
But I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns.
A really serious topic, a substantial debate, and a sudden appearance of a European country. Can Finland enter stage right? Who knew Finland was not only going to be a topic that both sides agreed upon, but also brought up at all? And by the way, what's happening in Finland that all of us need to know about? So that's what I spent a little time on in the last few days, is taking a look at what do we need to know about from Finland? What can we learn from Finland when it comes to gun laws and school security? And are we talking about the Finland that tops the regular surveys about the world's happiest place to live? Is that the Finland we're talking about? Because it sounds like we could learn a few things from them. So let's spend a little time on Finland. Let's go to Finland together. That's what we're going to do today. Now, I would prefer to have gone in person and had a lot longer conversations. As a journalist, that's always what I want. But what I did is I pieced together some different research online and looked at news articles also over the last 2 decades to try to pull out what are some of the key things that you should know about Finland. And one of the most important things is just to get an understanding about the country overall, so we can then talk about some of these gun laws that are different in Finland and also talk about school shootings in that country. So the first thing you should know about Finland is that it's a small country. The population is around 5.6 million people. So if we want to compare that to the United States, we're talking about combining Los Angeles and Phoenix, for example. That's about the population of Finland. Or if you're on the East Coast, the population of Finland is comparable to the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Queens combined if you're in New York City. So a small country. The United States has a population of more than 330 million people. Finland, again, is 5.6 million. Most of the people in Finland, 90%, have a Finnish background. It's not that there's no diversity in the country, but they do have a commonality of shared background. Finland is about twice the size of Georgia. If you're thinking about the U.S. map, it's also just slightly smaller than Montana. So either double the size of Georgia or slightly smaller than Montana, and you'll get an idea of just how big Finland is. And if you look at it on a map, you'll see, it's pretty north. It's pretty north, and it's also a new member of NATO because of its proximity to Russia and because of what's happening in Europe. This just happened over the last year that Finland becomes a member of the largest military alliance in the world. In many ways, though, it is, I don't want to say by itself, but a little bit separated from the rest of Western Europe. So we're talking about a small country that has a very unique geography where hunting is a tradition. It's part of the culture, and its gun ownership is not unheard of because of the culture and how the culture has developed. As I was looking through a few different facts about Finland, and one of the sources I used on this is the CIA's open source handbook, pieces together a lot of really interesting information. But this stood out to me, and I thought it would be interesting to you. In Finland, both parents can stay home on an earnings-based allowance when they have a child, and they can stay home with that child until the child is 11 months old. At that point, they can choose to stay home longer if they want to spend more time at home, and they would get a flat allowance rate for that. Or there's public subsidized childcare that's there to support the family. This idea of community support and an emphasis on family, work-life balance, community is really something that is indicative of Finnish culture. And it is one of the reasons why it does top the survey for the world's happiness report that comes out on a regular basis once a year. Finland is often considered the happiest country in the world because of the way that the people answer questions about how they feel about their country and a variety of different issues. So overall, a place where, although you might have both parents working, or by the way, women participating in the workforce is very high, fertility rates are very high, there is a sense of community and national support for the family. That really stood out to me. And it's going to become relevant in what I'm going to talk about next related to gun laws, because one of the things that we see is a real local law enforcement involvement. Now, when Governor Walz and Senator Vance were talking about Finland related to this conversation about gun laws and school shootings, I don't know if either of them realized that there was actually a school shooting in Finland just a few months ago. School shootings in that country are extremely rare, but there just was one by a 12-year-old. And I want us to keep that in mind. Gun laws in Finland were changed over the last 20 years because there were two extremely violent school shootings, one in 2007 and one in 2008. One was done by an 18-year-old, another one was done by a 20-year-old. And in both cases, you had several people who died, who lost their lives. So it was in the aftermath of this that Finland, a country where it's not unheard of that people own guns and go hunting, decided that they're going to change some of their gun laws. And here's what they did. They did a variety of different things. They raised the age where you could own a firearm, and the age was raised from 15 to 18, so 18 years old. In order to own a pistol, so not like a hunting rifle, you're going to have to be 20 years old. Everybody that has a gun in Finland is going to have to receive a license. And this is where it gets very interesting, because in order to get that license, you're going to go to your local police station. Now, you have to think about this. Gun laws in America are really determined by your state rather than the national government, the federal government. But in Finland, you're talking about a country that's comparable to the size, it could be comparable to the size of some major cities in the United States. And so the local law enforcement is tied directly to the federal government, not necessarily tied to a state, at least from what I'm seeing, or a county, the way that we're set up. So you would have to go down to your local law enforcement and you would have to talk to them about the gun that you want to own and also the license that you want to procure. And in order to do that, you'd have to explain why you want the gun. Oh, I like to go hunting. I'm part of a hunting club. You'd have to sit for an interview or actually bring some evidence that you've had some sort of medical exam. And the police, the local law enforcement, have some power in taking a look at you and deciding whether or not you should actually get a license. When they talk to you about that license, they're also going to talk to you about proper storage, which is another a component of gun laws in Finland. Not only storage in your home, but also storage in a vehicle or when you're transporting your gun, or how you're going to take care of the gun. That is a key part in actually in exchange for a license. So this is happening at a very local level. According to different estimates I saw, about 8 to 12% of the population in Finland has a gun license. And they have these statistics on this, again, because it's a smaller amount of people. They're dealing with local law enforcement. The local law enforcement is then working with the broader gun laws to enforce them. And so there's really community involvement. In the United States, for comparison, again, different states, different laws. Uh, and some states will share or honor somebody else's license to carry a gun, for example, but it's not universal. The estimate is about 30% of the US population are gun owners in some capacity. We don't know what that means, if that they own a hunting rifle, they own a pistol, maybe they work in law enforcement. So we don't have those statistics to break out. But that's what stood out most to me, is about the local law enforcement having eyes on somebody who's getting that license and having specific requirements that they're going to review with that gun owner. Now, what does this have to do with school safety? And what does it have to do with school security? And here's where I ran into a little bit of a dead end, because there wasn't a bunch of information about school security in Finland. I was thinking maybe I'd look up and I'd say, oh, well, they have metal detectors, or they have fences, or their schools are really small, or maybe there's something that I could pull out for you. I didn't find that yet. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I just didn't find it yet. What I did do is I looked at the most recent shooting to see what could we learn from that. And this shooting was different than the previous shootings that then changed gun laws, because this school shooting happened by the hands of a 12-year-old. So this is a person in the country that would not be able to legally own a gun. And although adults could purchase a weapon for a 15-year-old in their family, there was very specific requirements for that, and the ownership is not with the 15-year-old. So there's a question about, how did this 12-year-old get this gun? And how did the 12-year-old commit this crime in the school? And again, we just don't have a lot of information on that. So what was interesting about looking at this exchange at the debate and how it was mentioned in relation to gun laws and school security, what I found is that there's some interesting parts of gun laws in Finland that maybe we could consider and talk more about. But when it comes to school security, I didn't find a wealth of information to pick through. There is something I want to share with you, though, that's going to take us to a completely different country and some reporting experience that I've had. And that is the time that I spent in Israel. And this is more than 10 years ago. So it's not a recent time, but it was a very informative report that I did while in that country. Israel is also a small country. It's a country where you're required to do military service for the most part. There is exceptions. So in general, the citizens know how to use a gun. You're also in an area where there's constant conflict. And so what was interesting to me at that time is that school shootings were not a big story in Israel. Why not? What did they do? There is something that's similar to what they do in Finland. When it comes to school security, what Israel does is that there's very high fences around the schools. I want you to think about this sort of like a fence that goes around a basketball court in a big city. So the fence is high enough that the ball is not going to bounce over the fence. It's going to be as high as a basketball net, but it's not, it's not incredibly high. It's just high enough that it's not easy to climb over. When I was visiting a school, the fence was there. The kids were playing in the playground, looked very normal. The gate to the fence is locked, and there's an armed security guard that is on campus at that gate. I watched a parent go into the school. They had to call the front office while they were outside the school, get approval. The front office tells the security guard, and they're able to enter. So there's a very strict structure to that. Parents aren't going in and out. They're not checking in at the front desk themselves. They're checking in with the security officer. Also, a police car makes rounds around the school with their lights on, not their sirens on, but they're very visible. And when I was standing there reporting, I saw them twice come by. So there is a vigilance to school security that's there, but the kids seemed very unaffected. And if for any of you have visited Israel, there's security around, but it doesn't feel scary. It feels appropriate for where you are in the world. I went a little deeper. I looked into gun laws. So if everyone knows how to fire a weapon, then does everybody have a gun at home? Turns out that's not the case for Israelis. And one of the officials I talked to, we talked about how you get a license. It's difficult to get a license to carry, even though you are required to serve in the military. It's difficult to get a private license to carry a gun. One of the things you have to do, which is similar to Finland, is you have to submit a form about your mental health, your behavior, and then that is for consideration for your gun ownership. So it's not just about aptitude, which, by the way, in Finland, you have to show that you have been trained to use the weapon, or you have gone somewhere to receive training, or you're in part of a family that hunts regularly. You have to show that you have some experience with the weapon, but you also have to be able to pass an interview. And this is something that's very similar in Israel, at least at the time of my reporting, was that you also had to do that. And it was something that you would regularly have to touch base. So it's not like you just get one mental health exam and you submit your paperwork from your doctor. You'd have to do it on a regular basis. So what do these two countries have in common? They have eyes on the person that's owning the gun. I wonder if that's just something for us to talk about a little bit more, with the understanding that Finland and Israel are much smaller countries, but they are doing something similar in that they are getting eyes on the person that is owning the gun from law enforcement or from someone in the local government. Is that something for us to consider in a country where there are many different states, many different laws, and a few different ways that you can buy and purchase a gun? That said, we're also going to consider that even in a country like Finland, where there are very specific gun laws, that country just experienced a school shooting. And the existing laws and the existing security requirements, as we understand them, would not have prevented that shooting. So this gives us something to think about. And isn't that what debate journalism is actually supposed to be about? Where we get to learn something, hear from multiple sides, and then have something more to consider. We're not going to have all the answers today, but I think I've learned a little something here. So I hope this was something interesting for you. It's just a little mini scoop of information. It's a preview of what we do every Monday when we provide Scoop, which gives you every story that you need to know on your radar for the week ahead in one serving. We get to broadcast that with you live and answer your questions and have a real conversation. It's where news works for you again. We not only prepare you for the week, but we get to answer your questions, and it's a lot of fun, and I look forward to it. So this is your mini scoop going into the weekend. I hope you have a good, happy, safe weekend, and I look forward to seeing you on Monday on Scoop on Smart News. Have a good one, guys. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.